They told him to stand still, to wear red, hold silence, and never cross the line. But what happens when what's behind the line is corruption? No cameras, no press, just a sealed folio, a disappearing van, and a document that was never meant to see daylight. Because the man walking out that side door, he wasn't just a retired head of state, he was still pulling strings across oceans, and the folio he tried to take with him, it wasn't his, it belonged to history. But someone stopped him, not with force, not with scandal, just with one word: hold. Before I show you exactly what was in that document, and why a royal guard risked everything to stop it, make sure you're subscribed with the bell turned on, and drop a comment below telling us where in the world you're watching from. Because tonight, the guard didn't speak to the man, he spoke to the system, and the system listened. Rain ticked gently against the tall windows of Lancaster House, the kind that polished the flagstones into mirror black and turned every lantern along the perimeter path into a blur of gold. Inside, the atmosphere was hushed but alert. Velvet ropes adjusted millimetre perfect. Place cards revised twice before being set, a fresh coat of polish still glinting on the brass doorknobs. The reception was by invitation only, not the kind that made headlines. No red carpet, no press pen, just a discreet postscript to a cultural exchange event between the UK and allied delegations. Art, philanthropy, diplomacy. The sort of occasion where powerful people smiled softly, drank quietly, and made decisions that would never appear on the public itinerary. Sergeant Ewan Hart stood sentinel just off the west corridor. 37 Coldstream Guards, 14 years in service. Tonight, he wore the ceremonial scarlet of his regiment, bearskin tall, gloves clean, every movement exact. To most of the guests, he was set dressing, a nod to tradition. But those who understood the detail knew otherwise. The placement of a guard at corridor junctions wasn't decorative, it was deliberate. Hart's duty this evening was simple in form, complex in consequence. Corridor integrity. Ceremonial observation. He was not to speak unless addressed, not to intervene unless public safety or asset control was breached. He was the quiet line between the event and the unexpected. Most of the house had been cleared earlier that day. Every steward and courier signed in, every folio and parcel catalogued and tracked. One such item, a sealed black leather folio with the palace crest and red wax seal, now sat atop a carved console table halfway down the corridor. It was to be handed off, later in the evening, to a registrar from the Crown Archives. Until then, it stayed in plain sight, but under quiet watch. Ewan had signed as witness, not to open, not to read, just to observe. He hadn't asked what was inside, that wasn't his place. But he noted the unusual weight of the folio when it was logged, thicker than ceremonial correspondence, and filed under a tag number that didn't match the evening's event codes. That didn't bother him, not yet. The palace often moved sensitive materials during public events. Old trick. Eyes front, hands still. A few metres away, a steward passed, tucking a last-minute guest name card into a brass frame. He leaned close as he passed Ewan and whispered out of the corner of his mouth, "Keep the west corridor clear, Sergeant. VIP's team is touchy." Ewan didn't reply. He didn't have to. His chin tilted half a degree, enough to register he'd heard. Touchy, in palace shorthand, meant something between high-strung and privately armed. Not military, not MI5, external. Usually a private team. Flown in with one of the international guests, polite enough to pass the optics test, but close enough to the real game to give stewards ulcers. The rumour, as it circulated among the staff, was quiet but unmistakable. A retired foreign head of state had arrived that morning, now a private citizen, but one with a global foundation, transatlantic interests, and no shortage of political gravity. He was here under the guise of a cultural board member, but few believed that was the whole truth. His entourage was small but deliberate, tight-suited men, a London-based liaison known more for her discretion than her titles, and a former diplomatic envoy who hadn't appeared on any of the official programmes. Ewan kept his posture, but his peripheral scan adjusted. There were too many unknowns on tonight's guest list. He noted the subtle shifts. A security aide checking sightlines behind a sculpture, a steward redirected from the west stairs, a side door tested once, then locked again. None of it was enough to breach protocol, yet taken together, it suggested something more than a donor dinner. It suggested movement, hidden logistics, intent. Still, Ewan remained statue still. That was the role. Not to chase whispers, but to watch for the line and recognize when someone stepped over it. And tonight, if the line came, it would come quietly, not with noise, not with force, with hands, with paper, with one wrong seal lifted at the wrong moment. It happened just after the wine carts had rolled through, the west corridor, until then a whisper-quiet artery of polished marble and breath-held movement shifted subtly. A pair of aides emerged from the side anteroom, one carrying a tablet, the other leafing through a slim brief. Both wore tailored suits and diplomatic badges affixed too cleanly, like they'd never actually been clipped to anything else. The taller of the two had a Foundation crest on his lapel, a private emblem, not official, and a voice that carried with American ease. "No media handling," he murmured as they passed. "If it hits press, we deny the transfer was ever here." The shorter one, brown hair, no tie, didn't respond. His hand dipped as they passed the console table, one smooth, practiced motion. He picked up the black folio, not glanced at it, not examined it. Picked it up like he'd been told exactly where it would be. Ewan didn't move. From a distance, the action looked routine. Someone collecting a document for a meeting upstairs. But Ewan's eyes weren't on the folio. They were on the corner seal, wax, red, impressed with the crest and accession ring, wrong angle. The man's thumb had half smudged the edge. A flicker of hesitation when it caught on the edge of his sleeve. And, more importantly, he hadn't looked at the serial mark before lifting it. Not even once. Someone trained to handle archival items checks the seal. Always. Ewan tracked the aide's motion without turning his head. Only his eyes. The folio vanished under the man's arm. No clipboard, no scan out, no steward oversight, not logged, not signed. He let them pass. To intervene now would violate the bounds of his duty. No security breach, no immediate danger. But his mind was already logging the moment. Time, direction, detail, thumbprint, distortion, lack of manifest. They walked the length of the corridor and disappeared around the corner, past the donor gallery and toward the private meeting suite reserved for diplomatic briefings. Beyond his post. Behind Ewan, a junior steward rushed into the hall, blinking fast, cheeks flushed. "Sergeant, did you see the Crown Archives folio?" Ewan said nothing, but turned his head half an inch. The steward looked at the empty table, then back at him. "It's gone," he said. "It's not supposed to be gone." Ewan's eyes stayed on the corridor where the aides had vanished. Touchy, he thought again. Armed, unfamiliar. And now maybe in possession of something they had no right to carry. Ewan didn't chase. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he did what guards are trained to do. He stood still and watched the system unfold around him. The steward, now fully pale, pulled a phone from his inner jacket and murmured into it, voice shaking but low. Code violet on registrar item. No manifest transfer. Confirm chain. Less than 60 seconds later, Registrar Dwyer arrived. He came without ceremony, a tall, lean man with silver hair and a permanent furrow between his eyes, even on good days. His black folio case was open under one arm, tablet already active in his hand. He looked at the empty table, then to Ewan. "Who picked it up?" Ewan didn't answer. He wasn't required to. Instead, he gestured down the corridor, 2 fingers tilted toward the meeting suite. Dwyer didn't press. He tapped the tablet screen, scanning through tagged entries. The folio in question, F097 Crown Hold, was logged as active, contents secured under diplomatic audit, designated for cross-agency cataloguing post-event. "Was anyone cleared to move it?" the steward asked quietly. Dwyer shook his head. "No. Not even internally." He turned the tablet so Ewan could see. The metadata showed the folio's chain of custody was still marked in situ, meaning it had not officially moved, meaning what just happened was unauthorized. Dwyer's fingers moved quickly. He accessed the scan shield, a read-only backup system used to verify sensitive materials without opening them. Each registered folio emitted a passive signature when scanned at close range, a kind of invisible watermark. But the device wasn't here to scan anymore. It had walked off in someone's arm. And yet, I might be able to trace a soft ping, Dwyer muttered. There's a passive registry beacon attached to these. Experimental. He flicked to another screen. A tiny pulse blinked in the system. Still inside the building, but just barely. The location, a meeting room adjacent to the south carriage exit, where service vehicles lined up under diplomatic cover. Dwyer's mouth tightened. They're trying to walk it. Ewan adjusted his stance, still calm. He didn't speak, but his hands shifted, subtly, back to parade rest, thumb grazing the seal inside his tunic. A subconscious habit, one he hadn't done in years. The steward hovered nervously. Do we escalate this to upstairs protocol? But Dwyer wasn't looking at the steward. He was looking at Ewan. You saw it go? He asked. Ewan gave a single nod. Dwyer hesitated, then handed Ewan a slim device, a backup scan token no larger than a car key. If you get within 10 meters of it, he said, this'll light green. Won't say what's inside, just confirms it's ours. Ewan took the token in one gloved hand, the red wax seal still pulsed in his memory. The thing about a folio like that, if it's being moved off ledger, someone wants it buried. By the time Ewan reached the southern corridor, the mood had shifted. What had begun as a donor reception now felt more like a lockdown in slow motion. Guests lingered by gallery doors that hadn't been opened. Stewards whispered more than they walked. And near the west carriage port, two unfamiliar men stood, posted like they owned the walls, shoulders squared, hands loose but ready, eyes that tracked movement too cleanly to be ceremonial. Private security. Their suits were good, their posture better. Not jumpy, not overt, just present in a way that made palace staff adjust their routes. One of them caught Ewan's approach. He didn't move to block but angled his body slightly, subtle, territorial. Something I can help you with, Sergeant? He asked. Polite tone, American accent, left hand near the jacket fold. Ewan stopped 2 paces short. Corridor sweep, he said simply. Venue safety. The man nodded slowly, like he understood the words, but not the implication. Appreciate the thoroughness, he replied. We've got our own protocols in place. No need to duplicate effort. Ewan didn't respond. His gaze passed beyond the man's shoulder to a staff door, closed but not locked, leading toward the service wing. That door was outside the designated guest flow. The same one listed in Dwyer's system as secure only past 1800 hours. A moment passed. The other operative, a shorter man, broader across the chest, tilted his head, watching. We're on a tight clock, the first one said. Softer now, just clearing a lane for departure. Nothing that needs flagging. Ewan's eyes didn't move. His tone didn't rise. This building operates under Royal House preservation rules. Clock or not, sealed corridors stay sealed. A beat of silence. Then the second man smirked faintly. Understood. It wasn't agreement. It was calculation. The first man gave a single diplomatic nod. We'll reroute through the main. As they stepped back, gracefully, no scene, Ewan caught sight of something behind them. A Foundation staffer, the same aide from earlier, slipping through the gallery doors and into the corner room listed as an administrative prep space. That room backed directly into the south arch, where a low-profile black van now waited, engine running, back door ajar. Everything was moving in slow order, no alarms, no sprinting feet. But Ewan could feel it in the floor. The folio wasn't being stolen in the traditional sense. It was being relocated just far enough to vanish, quietly, plausibly, diplomatically, unless someone said otherwise. He looked down at the scan token in his hand, still dark, but they were getting close. She appeared like she'd always been there. Rhea Nolan, plain blouse, dark slacks, no name badge. Standing halfway down the corridor, just outside the frame of everything important, she looked like a junior protocol officer, or maybe someone from archival support waiting for the night to end. Ewan had barely registered her before she stepped closer. "Sergeant Hart," she said, voice low, deliberate. "You don't remember me, that's fine." Ewan's body didn't shift, but his attention snapped to her like a wire pulled taut. "Don't break stance," she added calmly. "Just listen." From the folds of her coat, she produced a narrow black cylinder, thumb-sized, unmarked. A palace-issue security token. Not ceremonial, not decorative, real. Everything they're moving tonight is being ghost scanned. Nothing shows on official channels until tomorrow's reconciliation log. But there's a backup cache. Passive copy. This, she held the token up just slightly, pulls the shadow from the beacon without flagging the main archive. Ewan didn't move. She gave the smallest nod. "I was liaison staff for the Strategic Registry Office. Cleared for the shared audit system across diplomatic collection. I've seen that folio's twin entry, and I know what's in it." Ewan's voice, when it came, was quiet. "Why are you telling me?" Rhea didn't blink. "Because you're not here to defend individuals. You're here to defend what they were meant to protect." He glanced down the corridor again. The van had dimmed its running lights. "They'll deny it's missing," she said. "Claim it was handed off. Then they'll say the registry was a misfile. Then they'll say it was duplicated in error. Every excuse has already been rehearsed." She extended the token. "You don't have to break protocol. Just get this within 10 feet of that folio. The rest will show itself." Ewan took the token. He didn't nod, didn't thank her. He just turned, precise, practiced, and resumed his post. But now his fingers curled slightly around the device. Still dark, still cold. But something was coming. The corridor remained quiet. Outside, the van's engine cut off. The brake lights glowed red for a few moments longer, then blinked out. Someone was waiting inside. No movement, no doors, just readiness. Ewan turned once toward the corner room. The door was closed now, but not fully latched. Through the half-inch gap, he could see a shadow cross the panelled wall. Not staff, wrong shoes, wrong pacing. He stepped forward. Not fast, not aggressive, just with intent. At the midpoint of the corridor, directly between the meeting suite and the South Service arch, there was a threshold. A natural choke point beneath the painted ceiling dome, narrow enough that only one person could pass at a time. That's where he stopped. And then he said the word, hold. Not loud, not barked, just placed, like a stone set down in water. But the effect rippled instantly. A soft mechanical thud echoed behind the walls, quiet, controlled. The kind of sound you'd miss unless you were listening for it. The service doors froze in place, magnetically sealed, not slammed, a fail-safe used rarely, meant for diplomatic visits, artifact lockdowns, and events where continuity of space mattered more than explanation. Two stewards down the corridor paused mid-step, their radios clicking once in acknowledgement. No panic, no question, just protocol in guessing. At the same moment, the scan token in Ewan's hand vibrated once. Green light, solid, no flicker. It was here, within 10 meters. The stolen folio, F097 Crown Hold, had not left the building. It was likely in the corner room behind that door, 30 feet away, maybe resting in a courier bag, maybe tucked into the jacket of a Foundation aide who thought private meant untraceable. Registrar Dwyer arrived within a minute. So did legal liaison Rafi, dark blazer, hair tied back, tablet already active. Neither asked what happened. The system had spoken. The guard had triggered it. Ewan handed Rhea's token to Dwyer without a word. Dwyer docked it into the tablet and pulled up the duplicate registry signature. Within seconds, it matched. Crown Legacy-related financial correspondence flagged for dual agency handling. Rafi's voice was cross-jurisdictional asset. No outbound clearance. No duplicate disclosure. Dwyer gave a nod. Freeze movement. Catalogue, witness, retain. Rafi tapped once more. Security will need a statement, but we keep it internal for now. No alarms, no security escort, just movement slowing, then stopping. The corridor remained still, quiet enough to hear the air system hum overhead. Ewan stepped back from the threshold and resumed his post. The word had done its job, one syllable, backed by centuries. The building had listened, and for now, that was enough. 10 minutes later, the meeting room door opened. Not hurried, not sheepish, just calculated. Out stepped the envoy. He was everything the rumours suggested. Early 60s, expensively forgettable. The kind of man who knew how to smile with half his face and let the other half keep secrets. His tie bore a Foundation insignia, his lapel a discreet flag pin. Behind him trailed the aide who had taken the folio, and one of the private security men from earlier, now jacketless, radio earpiece removed, trying to look like he wasn't security at all. Registrar Dwyer stood waiting beneath the painted dome, tablet in hand, legal liaison Raffi beside him, arms folded loosely, fingers still hovering near her screen. A palace steward waited nearby with a folding table and a neutral expression, ready to set up a surface if needed. And Ewan, still in full dress, stood squarely at the centre line of the corridor, unmoved since the word hold. The envoy slowed, glanced between them. "You've created quite a delay," he said mildly. Dwyer didn't rise to it. A courier folio left the table without manifest clearance. That pauses everything. The envoy offered a bland smile. "Clerical mix-up. One of ours mistook it for a prepared packet." Raffi stepped forward now, her tone still professional. "It's tagged Crown Legacy, category Dual Registry. Its movement requires signature from both the issuing sovereign body and the host registrar. Neither occurred." The envoy waved it off. "That's an internal classification. Our understanding was that the document had already been cleared. We acted in good faith." Dwyer's voice didn't shift. "The document contains cross-border cultural endowment routing instructions. If it leaves this building undocumented, it becomes an unfiled transfer of state-adjacent interest. That is not a good faith action. It's a breach." The aide, still holding the courier bag, looked briefly to the envoy. The envoy ignored him. Instead, he looked at Ewan. "Is this where we are now?" he asked. Uniformed guards dictating procedural boundaries over routine paperwork. Ewan didn't respond. He didn't have to, because this wasn't his decision anymore. He had triggered the safeguard. The system had activated. What followed was process. The steward unfolded the table. Dwyer nodded to the aide. "Please place the folio here." Reluctantly, the man complied. Raffi stepped forward with her tablet. "We'll open and verify contents under dual custody." The envoy's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Beside him, the aide muttered, "It's just fundraising documentation." Dwyer looked him dead in the eye. "Not when the money moves with influence attached." The room fell into a professional silence, the kind where nobody blinked, and everyone knew what this really was. This wasn't about a folio anymore. It was about who got to decide what was hidden under velvet and what had to be held up to the light. The folio landed on the felt-covered table with a dull, final sound. It wasn't heavy, but it felt like it was. Registrar Dwyer put on his gloves, unfastened the red ribbon, and broke the wax seal with a quiet crack that echoed far louder than it should have in a corridor full of officials. The envoy didn't look down at the contents. Neither did the aide. They stood still, practiced. Inside were 6 documents, all neatly enclosed in plastic sleeves, indexed in plain typeset, no letterhead, no flourishes, just clean, unassuming print. Raffi read through the first page in silence, then the second. Her eyebrows didn't move, but the tablet in her hand began logging. Each document contained language that, in isolation, was vague. Cultural endowment, donor channeling, cross-jurisdictional discretion. But page by page, the intent became clearer. These weren't just charitable contributions. They were financial agreements. And not just to museums or exchange programs, but to entities positioned near lobbying groups, media platforms, and heritage exemption review boards. There were notes on tax pathways, suggested talking points for aligned messaging. A full-page memo referencing legacy compatibility language designed to match recent UK speeches by sitting officials. Nothing explicitly illegal, but nothing clean either. Most of all, there were no disclosure records, no co-signatories, no formal registry entries. These were meant to stay inside envelopes and inside rooms like this. "Are these final drafts?" Raffi asked. The aide cleared his throat. "They're pre-clearance, unsigned. Nothing was enacted." Dwyer tilted his head. "Then why was it removed in secrecy?" No answer. Raffi tapped her screen. Under the Heritage Interface Act, any instrument bearing cross-border funding, intent attached to diplomatic or ceremonial property, becomes subject to co-holding review. These aren't protected by private status. They're procedurally public. The envoy gave a tight, practiced smile. "You'll bury it by morning." "No," Raffi replied, voice calm. "We'll log it." She turned to the steward. "Seal the folio. Transfer under royal custody. Copy to the Crown Office. Duplicate retained for audit." The steward stepped forward with a fresh case. Carbon fibre, inner latched, royal crest discreet in the corner. The aide handed it over, slowly. As the steward locked the case and affixed the tag, Dwyer pulled a hard-copy transfer slip from his satchel. 2 signatures. Raffi signed first, then Dwyer. The folio was no longer in question. It was evidence, not of crime, not yet, but of a truth someone had tried very hard not to let see daylight. At 1900 sharp, guests began filing into the blue drawing room. They'd been told there would be a short, informal address by one of the evening's special guests, a retired statesman with deep ties to transatlantic philanthropy. Nothing official, nothing press-facing, just a few words over a glass of wine about shared legacy and public good. But the podium remained empty. The murmurs started around 1907. By 1912, a steward stepped onto the small riser, cleared his throat, and made the announcement with professional neutrality. "Due to scheduling constraints, the evening address has been postponed. We thank you for your understanding." There was no applause, just polite confusion. Some guests smiled it off. Others checked their phones. A few quietly left. Back in the corridor, the envoy was on the phone, face turned away, voice hushed but sharp. The aide stood nearby, pale now, his foundation lapel pin removed. Raffi handed the sealed folio case to an arriving palace courier. The transfer was smooth, logged, and witnessed. No press, no questions. Inside the corner room, the printed programs listing the former head of state's remarks were quietly collected and shredded. And the van, gone, no security men, no driver, just empty space, where an exit had almost become an escape. Ewan remained at his post. He hadn't moved since the word hold. He hadn't spoken again. But as the guests slowly filed back through the corridor, a few looked at him with something more than polite dismissal. They didn't know why the speech had been cancelled, or why the tension had vanished, or why the envoy had suddenly lost his composure. They didn't need to, because somewhere deep in the walls of Lancaster House, the system had worked. Not the political one, not the diplomatic one, the older one, the one built on duty, stillness, line integrity. A guard had said one word, and it had been enough to stop everything. The last guest departed just after 8. The house was still lit, but quieter now. The kind of hush that settles over old buildings after they've done their job. Chairs straightened, doors relatched, carpets brushed free of the night. The sealed folio, now double-wrapped in archival casing, was escorted through the East Passage, bound for Crown Registry custody. 2 stewards walked it down, no words between them. Just the sound of polished shoes on stone, and the careful breathing of men carrying something too important to drop. Ewan remained at his post. The corridor where it had all happened was empty again. A single candle sconce flickered on the far wall, casting shadows against the crown moulding. The marble beneath his boots held a faint echo of the day, damp from earlier rain, tracked faintly by the soles of 1,000 ceremonial shoes. Registrar Dwyer passed him once more. No folder, no tablet, just his coat over one arm. He slowed slightly. "Sergeant!" Ewan turned his head, but said nothing. Dwyer gave the barest nod. Well held. Then he moved on. Raffi followed behind, tablet still tucked under her arm, fingers scrolling slowly as she reviewed the final chain of custody notes. She paused only once as she passed, her voice so quiet it barely reached. Thank you. Not as protocol, not as formality, as fact. Ewan gave no reply. He watched them disappear around the corner, into a space reserved for people who dealt in outcomes. His job wasn't outcome, it was lines. And tonight, the line had held. He adjusted his gloves, checked his posture. The corridor stayed still. In the distance, a clock struck the hour, and outside the flagstones had begun to dry. Do you think Sergeant Hart was right to break his silence with just one word? Or should he have let the registrar handle it quietly, even if the folio slipped out the door? And what about those documents? If they were unsigned and unfiled, does that make them harmless, or just well-timed shadows? Tell me what you think in the comments. I read everyone. If you believe he did the right thing when it mattered most, hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed and tap the bell so you never miss what happens behind the rope. And if you know someone who still thinks Royal Guards are just there to look impressive in red coats, share this with them. Another confrontation's waiting for you on screen right now. Click it, and I'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place, right here on Guard Focus. Thanks for watching.